there's this notion that somehow there's moral equivalence between what the terrorists did and what we do, and that's absolutely not true. We were very careful to stop short of torture. The Senate has seen fit to label their report torture, but we worked hard to stay short of that definition.
Well, what is that definition?
Definition is the one that was provided by the Office of Legal Counsel. We went specifically to them because we did not want to cross that line into where we were violating some international agreement that we'd signed up to. They specifically authorized and okayed, for example, exactly what we did. All of the techniques that were authorized by the president were, in effect, blessed by the Justice Department opinion that we could go forward to those without, in fact, committing torture.
Let me go through some of those techniques that were used. Majid Khan was then suspected of was subjected to involuntary rectal feeding and rectal hydration. It included 2 bottles of Ensure. Later in the same day, Majid Khan's lunch tray consisting of hummus, pasta, sauce, nuts, and raisins was pureed and rectally infused. Does that meet the definition of torture?
That does not meet the definition of what was used in the program.
Yeah, nice guy. So I yeah, probably should have put one on up top there. But what's done is done. You go in with the cold open you have, not the cold open you want. So I am now joined by our super producer Jake, and as always, our graphic designer extraordinaire J. Andrew World. And oh, who's this? This is Jason Myles of, yeah, no, people are cheering from him because they know him from, they know his music, Bitter Lake Oakland, and because they know his podcast. This is Revolution.
This is Revolution. I hope so.
Absolutely. Yeah, so the reason I was strolling down memory lane with Richard Cheney there, as he's explaining why technically, if you think about it, pureeing somebody's lunch and forcibly inserting it up their rectum is not actually torture because the Justice Department said it was fine.
We always stop just short. So it's a fine art to get right to that line. You need to be a really expert practitioner.
The look on his face of like, what do you mean? What do you mean? You've never had food shoved up your ass?
And like I love the product placement of Ensure. It was Ensure because we want to ensure it's not torture.
Of course, it's healthy.
No, it's fine. I mean, I'm sure half the people in LA are doing that just for health reasons.
You've never had an Ensure peanut pasta sauce enema, then you have not been to SoCal, my friend.
Fair enough. Well, hold that thought for a few minutes from now. But the reason we were strolling down memory lane with Mr. Cheney is because he was just back in the news again. Because his daughter, Liz Cheney, is the vice chair of the January 6th committee, and she is very likely about to lose her primary to a Trump-backed challenger. So Dick, being the good father that he is, recorded this ad to see if he could help her out.
In our nation's 246-year history, there has never been an individual who is a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump. He tried to steal the last election using lies and violence to keep himself in power after the voters had rejected him. He is a coward. A real man wouldn't lie to his supporters. He lost his election, and he lost big. I know it, he knows it, and deep down, I think most Republicans know it. Lynn and I are so proud of Liz for standing up for the truth, doing what's right, honoring her oath to the Constitution, when so many in our party are too scared to do so. Liz is fearless. She never backs down from a fight. There is nothing more important she will ever do than lead the effort to make sure Donald Trump is never again near the Oval Office. And she will succeed. I am Dick Cheney. I proudly voted for my daughter. I hope you will too.
I'm Liz Cheney, and I approve this message.
Yeah. So a couple thoughts about that. Now, I know Jake is too young to remember this, and Yeah, I don't know. I could never keep track of how old Andy is, but but I know Jason, being about my age, will we'll maybe be able to recall a different election that was 22 years ago. There was the Democrat was this guy named Al Gore, who used to be vice president. The Republican, and his running mate was Joe Lieberman.
Who are these people? I was born in 2004. I don't.
One of them invented the internet, allegedly.
Oh, okay, cool. I use the internet, so
Yeah, no, totally right. So your guy would have been Al Gore, but then the Republicans were George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. Jason, as you recall, what happened with that election? Who won? How did that play out?
I actually remember watching the news when they announced that Al Gore had won. I don't know if people remember that. And then there was a whole situation with a recount, and then what happened in Florida was the news for the next few months, right?
Yeah, no, I can remember I can remember sitting up with my sister and her husband in Pittsburgh and watching the returns on election night, and assuming that by the end of the night we'd know what had happened, and we sort of did and sort of did it, right? It was announced that Gore had won, and then maybe not, and then maybe Bush won, then maybe not. And the long and short of it, since I know the average Give Them an Argument viewer is was born in 2017, so this is all new. But the long and short of it is that Al Gore got a lot more votes than Bush, right? He got well over 500,000 more votes throughout the country. But we live in this weird, not terribly democratic setup where that part doesn't matter. What matters is how the votes are distributed, because the Electoral College. So it came down to Florida. Now in Florida, there were tens of thousands of people who were purged from the voter rolls by a lady named Katherine Harris, who was the Republican Secretary of State. Allegedly, in most cases, for being felons, but quite a few of them don't actually seem to have been felons. Quite a few of them maybe had names that sounded like felons, or like I guess the charitable interpretation is there was a mistake of some sort was made. So quite a few people who should have been allowed to vote.
Questions about the voting, the way they voted to the voting machines, if you remember that. You remember that whole
the hanging chads.
Yes. Yeah, there were quite a few irregularities about the actual. So I mean, the people who were purged from the voting rolls illegitimately, people who should have been allowed to vote who are not. On the most generous, like the most conservative estimates, that's at least like twice the margin that Bush allegedly won by. And the most liberal estimates of that number of people who were wrongfully purged from the voter rolls is like up to like 20 times as many as, so like that would be like as many as 40 times as many as the alleged
and Bush's brother was the governor of Florida at the time.
Yes, not coincidentally. Yes. Yeah. So the hapless Jeb, who people may remember as a minor comic relief character from the 2016 election.
Yeah, last seen locking his keys in his minivan, having to go into like a Kinko's or something to use the phone to call the AAA. That was like my favorite tweet from a few years ago.
Yeah. And so, yeah, by some estimates, as many as 40 times the 537 vote alleged difference between Bush and Gore is the number of people who are purged for the voter rolls who shouldn't have been. But even in terms of the votes that were cast then, to get to that 537 vote lead for Bush that was finally the official tally, you have to ignore a whole lot of dubious votes because of these irregularities about the machines and the ones that were not punched all the way through or were, but like, it was pretty clear when you looked at them what the intention was of the voter. In fact, there were enough irregularities about this that there was a recount, very reasonably, right, to make sure that all of the votes were being counted correctly, or at least there started to be a recount. At which point there was a riot, which is, the culture war has changed a lot in the last 20 years. This wasn't quite as like luridly crazy as January 6th. There was nobody dressed up as a shaman or anything like that. These guys, in fact, were famously all dressed up in nice suits. It was called the Brooks Brothers riot. But it did effectively shut down the recount site to give the Bush-Cheney legal team time for to continue their main strategy. And then it worked because the Supreme Court ruled in a 5-4 nakedly partisan way that all of the conservative judges on one side, all of the liberal judges on the other, that they had to stop the recount. And so, first thing that strikes me about that ad is like, okay, Donald Trump is the biggest threat ever to the Republic because he tried to steal an election, like unsuccessfully and incompetently. Whereas Dick Cheney, who successfully stole an election, is, I guess, less of a threat to the Republic.
Some might argue 2 elections because of the irregularities in 2004. But, because we don't audit our votes in this country, we don't know.
Yeah, I mean the Ohio stuff in 2004 is much less clear, but I mean
I'm not gonna sit here and be like on that hill, die on that hill for the for the 2004 election. But
certainly Dick Cheney would not have become vice president in the first place. And when we say vice president, anybody who remembers those years, I mean he really had an unprecedented amount of power as vice president. I mean he was kind of de facto co-president.
I've only seen the movie Vice.
Yes, if you've seen the movie Vice, that gets it done too. That like he would not have risen to that position if not for the fact that he and George W. Bush successfully stole an election. And even on the January 6th front, that the Brooks Brothers riot in Florida in 2000 and January 6th, I mean there were again a couple differences between them. I think that the January 6th was much more luridly crazy and violent, because of some of the different people who are involved. It wasn't like nerdy congressional staffers. But also January 6th, there was really no clear plan. Like, okay, how are you going to get from this to like actually overturning the election result? It was kind of like that Far Side cartoon with the ... here a miracle occurs, right? Whereas the Brooks Brothers riot was part of a carefully orchestrated plan. But the 2 events do also have something interesting in common, which is that both of them were actually like one of the main organizers in both cases was the same dude, Roger Stone.
With that Nixon tattoo on his back.
Yeah, so I don't think people know this. Like Roger Stone has a Nixon tattoo on his back.
Yeah, when he got arrested, they took photos of his tattoos because I guess that's what you do when you get arrested like that. And he has a back tattoo on the center of his back of Richard Nixon, which is just amazing.
Yeah, he's a very weird guy. He kind of likes to dress up like the Penguin. He was a very regular guest on the Alex Jones show, which I know because it's sort of a like, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about this because I actually think that like it's easy for leftists to get sucked into like being obsessed with the most luridly crazy right wingers, and like I actually think the ones who do the most damage in most cases are not like the flashy Alex Jones types. They're like the suburban Republican guy who owns a boat dealership and like gives a lot of money to like shitty candidates. Like that's the guy who's actually probably doing the most damage in the world. But despite having that position, every time I go on a long car trip, I end up listening to a bunch of episodes of Knowledge Fight, which is this podcast that's entirely about Alex Jones, just because it's like fun. So I know way too much about Alex Jones, including his relationship with Roger
Maybe
Stone.
you could host a Q&A at a future film screening for Alex Jones. You know,
For Alex's war.
Yeah. Maybe he can get you to replace Glenn for a couple.
Yeah, might
bookings.
might be a different interview style. I'll just leave that there and make no further commentary on it. But yeah,
But no, it's funny that you said that because or saying I'm too young, because actually I probably experienced this so much more violently than you, in that I was 9 and my mom was probably the biggest capital L liberal you would ever meet in your life. So imagine, I was like, this was the worst thing that ever happened to me, was because I thought Gore was like the savior, and Bush was like the antichrist, and maybe was correct about half of that. But it's I didn't know at the time about the Brooks, what is the Brooks Brothers riot, but it kind of speaks to the aesthetics really being the issue with the January 6th riot rather than the substance, right? Like, as long as it's a bunch of well-polished white guys in suits, kind of doing it a little bit more, it's a little bit more panache, I guess, or less
hard collar, like Sam Cedar might say.
But if it's a bunch of Andes dressed like shamans, then it becomes an issue,
Crap,
that was going to be my after post-game look.
No, I strongly encourage that. Everybody should go to the post-game dressed like a shaman. Yeah, Jason, you were going to say?
No, I think we also have to remember the time in which a lot of this stuff took place. The 2000s were a very apolitical time. I think people were more worried about Y2K mishaps than the presidential election. It almost felt like a foregone conclusion that Al Gore would succeed as president, much like 2016. A lot of people felt it was a foregone conclusion that Hillary Clinton would succeed Obama. And so only, the Brooks Brothers riot is kind of a political insider discussion more than a common discussion that you probably would have had at that time. To be honest with you, it was more the election was stolen. And then we really don't start hating Bush Jr. Until 9/11.
Yeah, that's because, of course, of this is the other half. So I wrote an article about this for Jacobin, came out today. It's called Dick Cheney was a way more effective, quote, threat to our republic, unquote, than Donald Trump. And part of what I get into at the end of the article is all that post 9/11 stuff. Now, a place I didn't even go in the article because it would have been too far off track is, all that stuff about how Trump isn't a real man because he lies to his supporters is pretty amazing, from the guy who more than any other single individual orchestrated the deception campaign on weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Set up his own little alternative intelligence office because the main intelligence services weren't telling him what he wanted to hear. And he needed Bush's briefings to just be that, right? He lied his ass off, constantly, throughout the whole thing. But also, if you want to talk about, threat, whatever our republic means, right? If you mean some kind of positive democratic institutions and the freedoms that are associated with it, I would think I don't know, right to privacy, right to trial by jury. These are all things that, the Bush Cheney, or really Cheney Bush administration, really savage, right? Donald Trump was certainly no friend of democracy, but he didn't, he was too incompetent, right? he didn't do anything that was anywhere near the level of what Bush and Cheney did, with mass surveillance, with indefinite detention, right? Just lock people up forever without any of the rights that normally criminal defendants or even prisoners of war would have, including American citizen, Jose Padilla. Really, really crazy shit that really undermined the kind of, what was left of a lot of those rights after the war on drugs, and with the going into the war on terror.
The war on terror, I don't know, again, this is one of those we were there, so we remember things. And this isn't to crap on you at all, Jake, but it was a weird time if you really go back and think about what conversations were like, because there was a palpable fear, because we never really had an attack like 9/11 in this country. On the same hand, no one really wanted to have another war to deal with. That a war to the level of like Vietnam, let's say. Because if you even look at the way the country viewed Vietnam, especially in working class areas, so many of their kids were coming back damaged, if not psychologically, definitely physically, if they came back at all.
Right.
So to go from kind of an anti-political, almost an apolitical time, which is pretty much the 8 years Clinton's in office, to all of a sudden there's this stolen election, to now we're fighting a war we don't really understand in the Middle East. There was a lot of people on what we would have called the left then, or we probably would have called them liberals at the time, that really, really hated Bush. And a lot of the rhetoric around him leading up to 2004 was the stolen election, which I find kind of funny that, Cheney talks about that.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, as a very earnest young man, I remember, being a grad student at Western Michigan, and I had having the redefeat Bush, bumper sticker, but Bush lied, people died, but we have, right.
9/11 was an inside job. Remember that?
Okay, that one I didn't have, but but I do remember people saying it.
There was like a fine line between like liberals and Alex Jones at that point in time.
No, totally. Alex Jones was actually trying to appeal to liberals at that time. Like if you go back and watch, a couple of my my favorite Linklater movies, right? Where Alex Jones has cameos, right? I mean, it's totally stuff that would appeal to libs.
Or was it Loose Change?
Loose Change 9/11?
Yeah, Loose Change was the like conspiracy theory documentary, but the way that because I mean Alex Jones, I mean I don't know how much his views substantively changed, but he played up. I hate Bush. I'm anti-war. I like weed. Right, like he played up all that sort of Austin boy stuff, and really played down the I love God, I love God and guns, and I think the apocalypse is going to happen in time now, right? Which was always somewhere in the picture, right? But I mean that's not what he chose to emphasize back then.
Well, it was gold and Jews, right? It was Jews control all the money, and there's gold underneath the World Trade Center.
Yeah, that's right.
It's kind of what Loose Change boils down to.
Yeah. Well, no, for sure. I mean, there's always like an ugly right-wing edge to conspiracy theories, whether it's explicit or not, right? I mean, like Doug Lade, I remember, wrote a good essay about this a long, long time ago, back before any of you people knew him, where he basically said, look, I mean, there's always like, even if you never spell out Jews, right? I mean, that's always the structure of these theories, right? That's somewhere in there. But
the Rothschilds. I still know people that say the Rothschilds. Right? That's like the answer to everything. Like it always boils down to the Rothschilds, man. They control all the money and they got the gold.
All right. Well, Andy, I'm gonna I will see you at the end of the episode and then for the post game. But meanwhile, because it's like if you say, Candyman in the mirror 3 times, if you say Bush did 9/11, that calls Dr. Kuba.
I've been listening since the first mention of the War on Terror. But, I was still on the clock when that happened.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was right. That activated the algorithm for the surveillance. Yeah. Fair enough. Well, before we leave aside Mr. Cheney entirely, as I was reminiscing about the Bush Cheney years and the aftermath, I did remember something amazing that, like, I just think. Well, okay, let's just let the clip do the talking. Jake, do we have the Still Friends one?
After 10 years, Texas attorney Harry Whittington still has pellets lodged into his right cheek and neck after former Vice President Dick Cheney shot him during a 2006 hunting trip. Cheney's shot sprayed as many as 200 birdshot pellets into Whittington's face, neck, and chest during a quail hunting trip at Armstrong Ranch in Texas. Although Cheney admitted that he was the guy who pulled the trigger, he never gave a public apology. Whittington defended his ill-mannered friend and told the Daily News that he never did need to apologize. It was an accident, and Cheney and Whitney are still friends.
So while we're finishing up the Trump-Cheney comparison, Trump just said that he could shoot a guy in the face and, like, all would be forgiven. Cheney actually tested the theory.
He tested the theory and it was proven correct. And it was more than all was forgiven. He got to forgive the man he shot, who issued a sincere, if perhaps slightly desperate apology.
We have it.
My family and I are deeply sorry for all that Vice President Cheney and his family have had to go through this past week. We send our love and respect to them as they deal with situations that are much more serious than what we've had this week. And we hope that he will continue to come to Texas and seek the relaxation that he deserves.
Yeah, no, that is I could, that is one step up from I could shoot a guy on Fifth Avenue and my supporters, would be fine with it. That is no. I could shoot one of them and they would issue a groveling apology for getting in the way of my bullets.
I don't even understand what he's apologizing for.
I mean, he's just doing what Dick told him to do. Clearly, right? Like, look at his eyes.
He's apologizing because he caused Dick all this embarrassment, by being shot in the face by him.
Yeah, similarly, every American soldier that served in Iraq owes George W. Bush an apology.
Right. Same
was there really a prayer that they sent out, that there was like a prayer that the soldiers had to say to George Bush? Do you remember that?
I think you might be confusing him with Caesar Augustus.
Easy mistake to make.
Pray for your leader.
But I mean, that's true power right there. And in a lot of ways, you mentioned being a very earnest defender of American democracy, still in college, through the idea that an election might be stolen could still outrage people rather than being treated as a matter of course, right? Like, only a rube would think that elections are conducted fairly and don't simply reflect a power relation between political factions, political sides. Not everybody has made it all the way to class interests, but at this point, I think that substantial plurality of Americans, for probably a majority of the ones that are brain poisoned by paying too much attention to politics, simply treat elections as a alienating spectacle of process that is divorced from any connection to popular will, popular sovereignty, popular legitimacy. But back in those days, this was considered a rupture, right? George W. Bush was supposed to be a singular catastrophe of the American Republic, and Barack Obama enjoyed so much of the goodwill that he had early on in his presidency from the left and from the international community, foreign governments, because they believed that those bad times were over. He didn't seem to get anywhere. There was a bit of disillusionment. Maybe America's not what it's used to, but when Trump got elected, then it's like, oh yeah, this whole thing's a sham. This is an absurd house of cards. I guess like Alex Jones was always right? Or rather, that ultra cynical view that shredded the American self-image as a representative democracy with politics cleaving closely to some popular consensus. That was revealed to be a myth, and people, including the very agents in the media and in culture that are supposed to reinforce that myth, that are supposed to reproduce it, that are supposed to propagate it. You now have Rachel Maddow, Fox News, and a billion other imitators, all holding up the moral legitimacy of their side and a kind of erstwhile America, while treating the current situation as this existential twilight crisis of political forces with power and subterfuge determining outcomes. And I mean, thank you, Bush and Cheney, and thank you, Supreme Court of the United States. Thank you, Antonin Scalia. There were all kinds of opportunities in the 2000 election for that mythical, responsible, deep state, power elite, leadership class, whatever you want to call it, the stewards of the American Republic in their own estimation, to display that principle, gentlemanliness, rule, respect, that was supposed to be the bulwark of American democracy. And it turned out that there was a substantial side in the Republican Party who were just like, yeah, but I think we can just get away with it. And they did.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I want to shift gears a little bit. We do, on a much more positive note, we do have a big announcement to make in a few minutes. But before that, I want to get in the Wayback Machine and go a little bit further back than where we started tonight, since we started with the 2000 election, and but a few hours ago, Jason sends me this draft of an essay he's working on for Sublation magazine about something that happened in 1999. Yeah, there we go. Coming soon, Sublation magazine, Woodstock '99. Peace sells, but who's buying? Which I
had to push for that title. By the way, they were trying to take that title away from me.
Nice. Yeah, I don't believe Megadeth was at Woodstock '99, but
they closed out the second stage.
Oh, really? I didn't. Okay.
With that song.
Interesting.
The second stage, Chili Peppers closed out the main stage. So there's a 2-hour gap between bands.
All right. So tell us about this.
I watched both the Woodstock '99 documentaries, and everything I've ever read or seen about Woodstock '99 is always generally about the music and the attitude of the music. And Woodstock '99 had 3 or 4 quote unquote nu metal bands. And if you look at the music of the late 90s, what really was dominating the charts was teen pop. And these nu metal bands were kind of the other side of the teen pop coin, because it was all suburban music that really wasn't the rock music, the quote unquote important rock music. I believe Moby says in one of the documentaries, he refers to it as the troglodyte elements of metal. So the story that you constantly hear is like boomer greed. These boomers got greedy in '99, and then the music was so violent, it whipped everyone up into a frenzy. And it was two bands they always blame. They always blame Korn, and they definitely blame Limp Bizkit. But neither one of those bands actually played when the fire started or the riots happened. What's his name? Who's the funk soul brother? I can't think of his name. Fatboy Slim was DJing at the end of the Saturday night where someone had stole an ambulance and was driving it through the crowd. We never blame, house music for that. We never blamed rave culture for sexual assaults that happened at the all-night rave and overdoses that happened at the all-night rave. And the Red Hot Chili Peppers were actually playing while the riots were really going off and fires were starting, and to the point where the Red Hot Chili Peppers set got stopped, and they were asked, "Can you quiet this crowd down?" And they then came out as an encore and did Jimmy Hendrix's Fire. A band like that had a deep enough catalog that they could have pulled something else out for the encore. I'm sure they planned it like, hey, let's do Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock. But I mean, you're good enough that you should be good enough that you can do something different. And the idea that boomers got greedy later, I always thought was wrong, because the original Woodstock in '69 was a cluster. The original Woodstock in '69, Altamont in '69, Woodstock '94. Actually resembles more Fire Festival. And these were always capitalist ventures. These were never anti-war movement festivals. They had no other meaning than to make money. The original promoters in Woodstock, there's 4 total. All of them had an interest. The first 2 that originally had this plan, not even to do a festival, they put an ad out in the newspaper. They're like, we're 2 budding venture capitalists, and we're looking for somewhere to invest our money. And someone hit them up and said, hey, I got this idea. I want to build a music studio in Woodstock, New York. I got my buddy. He's throwing some festivals. He's also a music insider. And they threw some money at it, and it was just a cluster from day one. They had to move the site the week of. You're dealing with a festival of this size. If you have to move site week of, you probably cancel it or you push it back. They didn't. They had it in a worse site. There was tons of problems. It wasn't a free festival. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the footage of people talking about it being a free festival. It was never the plan. They sold about 100,000 tickets, and they actually borrowed millions of dollars to pay artists, because they were paying artists over double, 1.5 times what they were usually getting, so they could get a really good roster. This is before the internet. Information doesn't travel as fast. And we don't know what festivals look like. This is also before the arena rock years. So if anything, a lot of these artists are like, yeah, whatever. Whatever, dude. And also another thing people don't talk about with the original Woodstock is the fact that if it wasn't for the National Guard helicoptering people out, there would have been even more deaths than the 3 that were reported. So the way we view Woodstock '99 is a bit of as an anomaly. I don't see Woodstock '99 as an anomaly. And Coachella definitely learned from the errors of Woodstock. That's why water, I believe, is like $2 there. Paul Toilette always felt like if you charge more than $2, people will get mad and tear your place down. It was a thorn in the side of the place where I worked when I did festivals. We were doing numbers the other night. I was like, we sold so much water. Had we charged $6 like we do with everything else. But knowing how festivals,
it's amazing how.
No, go ahead.
It's amazing how a substance necessary for human survival somehow you always seem to move a lot of it when you bring a lot of people together under sweaty conditions where they move around a lot.
Yeah, no, I mean it's the like at the diabetes festival, like the insulin sells like crazy.
Well, I'm a libertarian, so I think that water, insulin, whatever the market says, that's what it should go for, and I don't approve these.
But that's why we need dynamic pricing, right? Like
Okay.
because water sometimes, right? Like you can't give it away, but at other moments, right? Like it turns out that people are willing to pay a considerable amount if the alternative is dehydration.
Woodstock is kind of the perfect example of the libertarian paradise. Ben, you're one of these people, you and probably our good friend Sam Cedar, who actually likes talking to these people on a bit of a regular basis. And I never hear you guys bring up Woodstock 99 because that's the easiest thing to point to and say, well, this is where your free market reigned.
Right.
Any vendor that didn't have enough supplies, they had to shut down. So it was only the vendors that actually brought more than enough. Also, this is in the era of cash-only festivals. Festivals don't start using credit cards until not too many years ago, maybe less than 10 years ago. You can really start using credit cards to the point where now that's majority of what you use. I've actually worked a few festivals that were credit card only. So ATM machines having to be refilled is a thing, which is also kind of dangerous if you think about something like Woodstock 99. And being able to charge $10, $12 for water, triple the price for food. What were you going to do about it? You were stuck. That's the whole thing about music festivals that people don't understand, or maybe they do understand and don't really realize it, is that their goal is the music is, imagine it like a bar. Bars don't give a damn what's played inside. They just want you to drink. Music festivals are the same way. That could have been a mixed show with Britney Spears and Limp Bizkit, but Britney Spears doesn't bring a drinking crowd. Carlos Santana had a #1 album at that time, but do Santana fans want to stay for 3 days? Can they stay for 3 days, right? So you've got this perfect mix of young drinkers with new money because we've opened up credit markets also. This is the era of kids walking onto a college campus and getting, the moment you walk on, hey, want a credit card and a t-shirt?
Somebody out there is still paying off that credit card debt.
Oh, absolutely. Numerous people are still paying off their credit card debt from the credit card they got with the t-shirt in 1999 when they showed up at Iowa State University as a freshman.
It should be like I have hundreds of thousands of credit card debt, and all I got was this.
All I got was this dumbass.
Should have been the shirt.
But think about this. How are those guys taking cash out? They're taking cash advances. You're taking 21.9%, if not more, cash advances.
Presumably. Presumably their private ATMs that charge a transaction fee every time you take cash out as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you can, for your $6 water, like you want to get out, you want to get $20 from the ATM, and you have to pay $10 in the ATM fee. Yeah. No, absolutely. So Jason, when is this article coming out?
I was told it should be out Monday.
Monday. All right, nice. Looking forward to that. I don't know why I'm suddenly getting this echo.
It's Kuba's fault.
Okay. Well, in any case, nothing we can do about that. Deep state iced in. So anyway, so all of this talk about festivals and lineups and crowds and all that stuff does bring me to our big announcement for tonight. Believe we have a brief musical clip sped up to 1.5 times to evade the copyright police to tease this. This is a hint before we actually do the announcement.
driving in the sun, looking up for number one. California, here we come.
All right. That maybe it amuses nobody but me, but but Jason,
yes,
what is going on in California at the end of the beginning of the last week of October?
Ben and I are doing a live show.
Yeah. We are doing the Give Them a Revolution live show in Los Angeles. There's some interesting distortion going on there with the graphics coming in.
That was actually intentional. I felt like the graphic, it was, I can't like zoom in and out, but like, yeah, Kuba, freaked him out.
Yeah, it actually somehow turned Kuba sideways. But yeah, I'm excited about this. We will. I guess we should probably hold off on mentioning the venue until we have until things are super nailed down. So we have the actual time and tickets are for sale and all of that stuff. But it is October 23rd is the tentative date. We're going to have Ana Kasparian is going to be there. Nando Vila is going to be there. And there are several other people who will be there. Who will as we kind of nail down and confirm that.
Everyone else is special guests.
Yeah.
Everyone else is and special guests.
Yeah. It's not out of the question. We could have Matt and David, and we'll have to find some way to rejigger that name to include Reckoning. But whether or not we do, we are certainly going to have them for future live shows. There's going to be one not too much later in New York where they're for sure going to be, but I hope we got them for LA too. But if not, we are still going to have a very full lineup for LA. It's going to be a big venue, should hold a bunch of people. I'm super duper excited about it.
I've been stoked. I've been stoked all day. Actually, I've been stoked since we got we talked to our person. I don't even want to get too much into our behind the scenes talk, but this is something that I've been working on with Ben for a while now, and to finally see it come to fruition, and to finally have a venue that wants to hold it, to finally have a date nailed down, to know that we can, if you guys buy tickets, they'll even add another show. So I'm excited for everything you guys are going to get. We've been spitballing ideas for a format. So you can imagine if you were at New York and you had a lot of fun, this is going to be even crazier because Doug Lane isn't in the way to fuck this up.
Yeah, no, that is really the main thing that I want people to get out of this is fuck Doug.
Will we have $6 water? Yes. We will have extremely expensive cocktails. This is going to be in a fancy part of Los Angeles. Venue change last minute? No. Venue change.
No,
we waited for the perfect venue the whole time.
Yeah. No, this is gonna be good. You guys are gonna like it. Fun will be had by all, and maybe even by the time people who are listening to this as a podcast, generally takes a few days to get that edited and up on the podcast feed. So maybe by then we'll have a ticket link to stick in the description. So and I
plan on when we're done with our panels, I plan on running through the crowd and taking questions like Montel Williams. Will I wear a deep state Kuba suit for that? I don't know, but I just might.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's right. Gonna be.
It's because he's drunk. That's why he's sideways.
Gonna,
he'll be appearing sideways at the LA show, so it's just a preview.
That's right. He won't be there in person, but he'll be on like a big screen at the front of the venue sideways.
So someone's asking if Ben's going to debate. The only way Ben's going to debate is if that other Ben comes and challenges him, like Clubber Lang in Rocky 3. If Ben Shapiro comes in and does a Clubber Lang.
Yeah. No, I would.
Hey, Burgess. if Ben Shapiro Clubber Langs, then Ben will have to do a debate right then and there.
Yeah.
Or I could trade him first, like Apollo Creed, for the
I would hope so. I would hope so. Yeah. No, I would really hate that. Ben Shapiro, please don't do that. That would be the worst thing ever.
Speak for yourself. I think that might be the first time you see Ben Burgis slap the shit out of somebody.
No comment.
Oh God. Hey, it's LA. You never know what's gonna happen.
Yeah, no, this is.
But if Andy wants to draw a picture of me and Ben doing the Rocky and Apollo thing, like the end of Rocky 3, with our two arms, I'm all for that.
Yeah, no, if it absolutely. Yeah.
Oh my God.
No, I think I'm fairly confident that that as much as I would love for that to happen, I'm fairly confident that other Ben is never going to do that. And I think he did it with Anna because I think he underestimated her. He didn't know what he was getting. But I think the reason I think it's never going to happen is that on Joe Rogan, right? I dropped my little hey, we were talking about Ben Shapiro for a minute there, and I said, if he ever wanted to come on the show, to discuss any of this, I would be more than happy to have him. And Joe said, "Oh, I'll bet he would do it." And I think if it was going to happen, it would have happened in the aftermath of that. But I think he prefers to pick his battles.
He would only do it if he had home court advantage and everyone was going to cheer and drown you out. Forget.
Isn't he an LA native?
Oh, it is home court advantage.
That's true. I mean, I don't know if it'd be home court advantage if he was walking on like Apollo Creed, and talking shit at the Give 'Em a Revolution live show, but
Ben,
nevertheless,
come Ben, it will be a friendly environment.
Absolutely.
An exchange of ideas.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, you just guaranteed that I'm going to try to instigate Ben Shapiro showing up to the live show, calling all sorts of names to see if it gets back to his circle of sycophants that go, "You got to do this, Ben. Don't let these lefties call you a sissy." Because I'm calling you a sissy. Kuba, it's all in your nostril, brother.
You got close up Kuba.
But you know what? Props to you for exfoliating because your pour game is on point.
Yeah. I assume that there might be a moment or two I could access the chat without being broadcast on YouTube, but apparently that was.
And he did it again. Look, you guys are going to have to deal with Kuba and his lack of V8.
All right. Well,
it's past my curfew.
All right, Jason. I will see you. I'll see you very soon. I will actually see you for real very soon. In a couple weeks, we're going to be recording a This Is Revolution episode on Jason's patio in Mexico. So
Live from Mexico. Ben said he doesn't care about the cartel violence. He's coming. Patches on the jacket and all. He didn't damn cartel schmarfel. He's coming to the violent side of Mexico. No, it's fine down here. It's pretty chill.
Yeah, no, it's the I assume that like within 5 minutes of the San Diego airport, like it's just like the fucking Warriors. Like you have to have to pass through different gangs of like colorfully dressed people who like don't want to let you through.
I will say this on air, be completely honest. I have figured out the quick way to get home, and this way they put a wall up so you can't really see Tijuana. I'm being totally serious. So anything that would have terrified you, you can't even see it.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, you'll see the ocean, and you'll be by my house. It'll be. So Ben and I'm even getting Ben's favorite beer. That's not true. Getting Ben whatever they have in Mexico.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know what the situation is for Western Michigan craft beers in Mexico, but so that might not be happening, but should still be a very good time. I will see you then, Jason. I believe Dr. Kuba is still having severe technical difficulties. Andy, do we have Andy? Yeah, there we go. Although you are muted.
Am I?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. This is going to be like, I remember, we were reminiscing about all this Woodstock '99, Brooks Brothers riot, Guantanamo Bay stuff, all those classics of my youth. I remember this old Mad TV sketch that was so PAX TV was this Christian network, and they did this sketch that was The Sopranos on PAX TV, and it was like so severely cut up that it was like the entire episode was like 2 minutes. It was like, tune in for another episode of The Sopranos next week from 9 to 9:02 on PAX TV. So the podcast version of this is going to be like that, right? Because like we're gonna, because like so much of the technical difficulties.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna actually work that 90 hours a week that we discussed last week, cutting up the podcast. That's not gonna happen.
I know Jason was giving me flashbacks because I remember in 1999 I went to a different music festival where they gave away free water. So I found the Socialist Music Festival.
Yeah, well, I mean that probably, without the price signals that are introduced by free market water, probably everybody was just dying of dehydration anyway, right?
No, it was actually pretty chill. I got a nasty sunburn. That was about it.
Oh, all right. I wouldn't have expected that. All those conversations with I don't know, Walter Block and Yara and Brooke have really misled me about how these things work.
Yeah, no, it was really nice. I went there from Moxie Frubus, and they wore. I remember one of the guys wore a Britney Spears T-shirt, so she was represented there, unlike Woodstock '99.
Y'all used to go to jam band music festivals like I did, or I went to like one, but that was the first concert I've ever been to. Langerado, Florida, 2007. That's a real music festival. It's not your scene, Andy.
No, it was a Falcon Ridge Folk Festival. I was at the time following a weird Canadian glam folk band who would sing about Solzhenitsyn.
And you've lived like 600 lives ever. So like I don't understand where there's so many different nooks and crannies in your biography that regular viewers have probably heard by now.
Yeah, no, I've lived an interesting life, and it's insane sometimes because I don't even believe I'm hanging out with rock stars and legends and whatever. How does it keep happening to me? I don't know.
Well, fair enough. Speaking of legends, I want to give it up to a member of the extended GTA crew who is not on screen right now. I don't know. I don't know how comfortable he is having his actual legal name shared on screen, so I'll just use his Twitter name, which is GP, who has been the one who has been editing those 60-second videos they've put on TikTok and also put on YouTube as shorts, and been really knocking it out of the park on there. And thanks to him, let me pour myself a drink here.
Shoot, I left my drink just out of camera.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll let Andy grab his drink. But in any case, it's but thanks to GP, we do have a milestone that is worth celebrating here. So we're going to actually let's just stick it up now. We have a so one of those, it was actually one of the first of the shorts that GP cut together, which it's from the Joe Rogan appearance. And it's from when Joe asked me if I am a straight up socialist. So I think we have that clip. To play.
Are you a straight up socialist or are you a democratic socialist?
The reason I put democratic in there is because there are obviously countries that have, called themselves socialists that have not had things that I care about, like, free speech and, multi-party elections. And so I certainly don't want to associate myself with that. But I care very much about socialized healthcare, about tuition-free higher education so people can go to school without having to be in debt for like decades, which is obscene. And I do think that the level of inequality that we get from our current system is indefensible.
I would agree with you 100%. Imagine if you had to have money to get your fire put out. Like if your house burns down, we call the fire department, they show up. Our taxes fund the fire department. That is essentially a socialist endeavor.
It's provided just as like a right that you should have,
right,
just for being a person, right? You shouldn't have to do anything special to get your house put out if it's on fire, and you also shouldn't have to do anything special to get treatment if you're sick, go to college in the first place. Yeah, so this kind of kicks us off on the that like first hour of the show, which is all about sort of social, democratic public goods, and I do try to get a little bit into sort of horizons beyond social democracy, talk about workplace democracy with Mondragon and stuff like that, but we didn't get too much into that, but we got a lot more into that. But the reason we just played that clip is because, again, this seems like a milestone worth celebrating, unless there was another that I somehow missed, but I really don't think there was. This is the first video on the Give Them an Argument YouTube channel that has made it to 1 million views.
Where's Jason's soundboard? We need the fake cheer.
Woo! Give me some time. I got to figure out this mic setup I got now. I might be able to run my iPad through it and get a soundboard. So just be patient.
So just imagine that Andy already had the soundboard.
Yes,
like a million. Pretty wild. I didn't really, when I joined this little channel just a year ago, never imagined. Pretty wild.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, all right. So, I was actually completely shocked when I heard that friend Mark, who's been on the show a couple times, but we were talking about something unrelated. In fact, I'll keep off air because the conversation started with me talking shit about a former guest on the show, so it'd be very bad taste to talk about that on air. But in that conversation last night, he was like, "Hey, looks like one of your videos is about to hit 1 million views," which I was shocked by because the like best one I'd seen was there was one of the Charlie Kirk clips. It was like a few 100,000, right? That's and I had no idea anything was beyond that, and then yeah, got up to a million last night. So I do not hate that.
Yeah, and don't worry if you're like one of the OG fans here. Like, there's always going to be a special place for the like 973 people that watch like a deep dive into Marxist theory of exploitation. Like, that's like 2 hours. There's always going to be those fans. We're not going to sell out, but it's pretty cool though that like the general message could get out to like a million people. Like,
it is kind of funny actually, because I remember, I think it's okay to say this, like, not that long after I went on Rogan, Lillian Sakarichia, who's one of our favorite repeat guests, had messaged me, and she was like, so I was really confused because she was like, I don't use my Facebook that much, but like I just had like 200 friend requests or something. It's like, why the hell is this happening? And then I realized I was the last guest before Rogan. So people were seeing the Rogan episode, and they like, that was the episode they saw, was the one, the one with Lillian, which I fucking love, that like that people are like going from that to like, she's giving this like really like rigorous like Marxist, class analysis. And so, I hope that I hope that some of those people started following her work and got a little boost from that.
Yeah, she's fantastic. So I'm happy for her.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So what's all right, so we're gonna have Ana Kasparian on in a few minutes. And then when Ana goes off, we'll have the philosophy segment with Dr. Jen, and then David Griscom and Matt Huber are going to be hanging out in the postgame for patrons. But until we get to Ana, let's what else we got going on here? What's
we got some articles, right? Since
yeah, let's do that. So we have a few minutes to do that. I actually didn't think we are gonna have time to stick this in, but Deep State Kuba's Deep State Masters got upset with him for coming on the show and sabotaged him. So let's get into some of the articles before Ana joins us.
So we got, let's see.
Yeah, so this is one came out a few days ago in Jacobin. It's called "The Trump Voting Kansas Electorate is a Better Protector of Abortion Rights Than the Supreme Court," and it just makes a pretty simple point, right? So this is about something that had happened about a week ago. So this is all since the last episode we did, which is that there was this ballot initiative. It was called the Value Them Both Amendment in Kansas to strip abortion rights from the state constitution. And, this is not like somebody's making some like crazy quixotic attempt to put something like that on the ballot in New York, right? This is Kansas. This is a place where actually, so pop quiz. I think you guys know the last Democrat to win Kansas in the presidential election.
That be Bill Clinton?
Oh no,
LBJ.
1964. That was the
total guess, but I just know he kind of has that like BDE that could win Kansas. That's it.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, and in 1964, that was already the first Democrat who'd won it forever. The last time a Democrat won Kansas before 1964 was FDR in 1936. So, so note FDR did not win Kansas in 1940 or 1944, right? He won in the big, his big sweep election in 36, when sort of in like kind of the first glow of the New Deal. And then it was a long time before that, right? So those are in fact, I believe those are the two times since Woodrow Wilson that a Democrat won Kansas's electoral votes. So this is not a famously liberal state. In fact, in 2004, Thomas Frank came out with this book called "What's the Matter with Kansas," where he was using the state of Kansas as a case study in the sort of triumph of American conservatism, right? Because it's like this is this the state with all of this poverty, etc. But nevertheless, right, people are voting for the most extreme pro plutocrat party because his analysis was basically the Democrats aren't offering enough of a choice on material issues, and people are voting on based on cultural values. So I think this is really significant in a couple of ways. Right? So one is just on the most obvious level, right? Like, if it's going to fail in Kansas, to be clear, this anti-abortion amendment, right? So, because Kansas right now, the state Supreme Court has ruled that their state constitution does protect a right to abortion up to 20 weeks, I think. So the status quo in Kansas is that you can't pass an anti-abortion law, right? Like, it's been held to violate the state constitution. And so they were trying to reverse the status quo, to open up the floodgates, right? Like that, how a bill becomes a law, Schoolhouse Rock parody in The Simpsons, right? We can put all kinds of crazy stuff in there. They're trying to open up the floodgates. So the very conservative Kansas state legislature could pass whatever kind of extreme anti-abortion laws they wanted to. And it failed. And it didn't just fail in a sort of 52-48 kind of way, right? It lost by almost 20 percentage points. It was a blowout, right? Failure. And I think this tells you, this definitely tells you something about how massively unpopular these sweeping anti-abortion laws are around the country, right? I mean, there is a reason why the right wing put all their chips in the most undemocratic branch of American government to do their will, on abortion, right? Because they knew that they couldn't do it through the elected branches. And I think it also just really usefully undermines this kind of civics class conception of how to think about rights and how rights are protected and all of that, right? So there's this kind of conception that I think a lot of people have. Again, I mean, it is roughly the high school civics class conception of this, which is like, well, when you think about individual rights or the rights of minorities, the main thing these have to be protected against is the tyranny of the majority. That that the majority is going to trample over all these rights, and so in order to stop that, you need to empower judges to whose only loyalty is going to be to the Constitution. And I mean, the second part we kind of know is bullshit anyway, because anybody who pays any attention at all to what the Supreme Court does knows that Republican lawyers are just as good as Democratic lawyers are at like finding ways to make clever legal arguments for whatever their preferred outcomes are, right? Like, there are many important decisions that are decided on like really nakedly partisan lines, right? All the judges who are appointed by Democrats rule one way, all the ones who are appointed by Republicans, rule the other way. That's not just a weird coincidence. And they can, if you empower judges, they could use that power to trample the rights of minorities and vulnerable groups, as much as they can to protect them, right? And they do all the time, right? I mean, like, this is the thing Sam Moyn is always pointing out, that like liberals who have this like sort of cling to this conception of what the Supreme Court does are really thinking of this very narrow historical window of like the Warren Court, when it was doing all of the good rulings like, Miranda and Brown versus Board and all that stuff. But like, Supreme Court also did Dred Scott and Plessy versus Ferguson. And if you go back to like the early 20th century, they were just constantly doing shit like overturning laws against child labor, that they came up with some reason why those were unconstitutional in the Lochner era. So the idea that there's some sort of built-in guarantee that unelected judges are going to use this power to protect the rights of vulnerable groups is just kind of baseless. And at least on stuff like this, right? Where their position is, the right-wing position is actually pretty unpopular. I mean, look, they might have voted for Trump, but Kansas voters are still better on this than the Supreme Court is.
I do want to say one thing. You overlooked the very obvious argument that the K-Hive pointed out to me, that letting states vote for this is misogynistic.
Okay, how's that work?
I have no clue. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't make heads or tails, and I just, then they blocked me, so I couldn't ask any follow-up questions.
All right, fair enough. Well, we've got Anna, so let's leave it there for right now. I will see you gentlemen in the post game. All right, we are now joined by the great Ana Kasparian. How are you doing, Anna? Oh, you're muted.
I'm doing well, Ben. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah. So we announced earlier tonight about the LA live show, which you were going to be at. So that's exciting. So yeah, it's been a little while.
It has been. I'm looking forward to the live show. We were supposed to have a live show in LA, not in LA. Sorry about that. I think it was supposed to be in Austin, right before the pandemic started. And then obviously that didn't happen. So I'm like glad that live events are coming back. Yeah. So it's going to be good. It'll be a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was thinking about, we're just talking about we were just talking about abortion rights, and as I was like getting ready for this, I was looking over your Twitter timeline, and I've seen this before, but it makes me laugh every time I see it. So the thing that is the pinned tweet on top of your Twitter is somebody named Ian Miles Chong, or I don't know. Doesn't matter. Have a who's tweeting about your reaction to the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, and which he describes as a meltdown. And so it's been like the pinned tweet for a month or something, and it's just like, I stand by every word, fuck boy, I think is the exact phrase. But we have just the first Jake, I think we have just the first like 30 seconds of that.
We don't even have paid family leave. We don't even have affordable childcare in this freaking country. Okay, and the people who fight against those kinds of laws are Republicans.
And yet,
what do you want them to do with their kids when they have to go to work? What do you want them to do? What do you want them to do? I want them to answer that freaking question. Answer the question. Journalists, ask them the question. Ask them. Ask them.
Yeah, which strikes me as a morally appropriate reaction to what the Supreme Court did. And the other thing that I really like about that is that that what you're emphasizing is not what people usually emphasize when they talk about this, right? What you're emphasizing is the way in which overturning abortion rights, and opening up the door for states to legally require women to stay pregnant, is what we're talking about, is a class issue. That this is something that this is something that hurts. That like rich people will always find ways, right, to get whatever kind of medical care they need, right? That's not something anybody really needs to lose sleep about, right? I mean, this is really something that impacts everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so the thing that I think everyone who doesn't know the history should absolutely learn it is how issues that absolutely do negatively impact our lives, culture war issues that right-wingers engage in, they focus on these issues because they really have nothing else to offer. And if you look at the history of the anti-abortion movement in America, it wasn't until about 5 years after the Roe v. Wade ruling that the right-wing leaders in this country, religious leaders, started to get active and really use it as a way to galvanize right-wing religious voters in the country. Prior to that, evangelical voters weren't really getting involved or engaging in the electoral system at all. They would maybe vote, but they didn't act as a block, and they didn't really advocate for anything. They just kind of kept to themselves. And it wasn't until this pretty terrible person who actually died a pretty terrible death that I enjoy reading about, to be honest with you, Paul Weyrich. Once he realized that he could use abortion as an issue to galvanize extreme right-wing voters, that's what he focused on. And then he got all these other evangelical leaders in the country to go along with it, and it became a rallying cry for them. And so for Paul Weyrich, abortion was just a tool that he could utilize for his own means. What really got him riled up was desegregating schools. He hated school segregation. I'm sorry, not segregation. He loved segregation. He hated integration and was actually pretty furious about the fact that these evangelical leaders who had then created their own private schools in order to continue segregation had lost their tax-exempt status. He was furious about that. And so he wanted to find a way to build power among the extreme right wing in this country, and he succeeded. Abortion was never really the goal or the focus. It was about using that issue to accumulate power. And the people who end up paying the consequences for this culture war are ordinary working Americans who are already struggling to get by. The right wing talks about the decrease in the birth rate. And I mean, all you need to do is listen to what Americans have been saying, the reasons they've been giving for why they haven't started a family. But instead of addressing those material needs, right-wingers are going to do what they do best, which is, no, let's just focus on the culture war. The bread and butter issues don't matter. In fact, we need to distract from the fact that we're not doing anything about the bread and butter issues. And so here we are. We're stripping people of their rights, and the right wing is able to do so, even though the vast majority of Americans don't fall in line with what they want. 3/4 of Americans want something different. They want women to be able to make decisions about their own bodies.
Yeah, right. Which again, I think is why it's worth emphasizing that. I mean, there is a reason why they needed to put all their chits in the getting these like Federalist Society ghouls groomed for like rising through the court system and doing it that way, right? That they get the most mileage out of the Supreme Court because that's the branch of government that people have the least democratic influence over. But I mean, I think what you said before that, it is really important that okay, if you actually, I mean, and this always drives me crazy because I'll see all of these right wing culture warriors. I don't know, like your Jordan Peterson types, will sort of talk about people, not getting married till later, people not having kids, etc., as if it were a result of, I don't know, feminism or some cultural something.
Cultural decline. They always point to cultural decline rather than thinking about fighting for the conditions in which people feel comfortable and stable enough to raise a family. Like who, I mean, look, there are plenty of people, so
Sure.
I don't want to make them feel like I'm passing judgment at all. I think people who want to start families in this day and age in America are like some of the most courageous, optimistic people on the planet. But when I consider it, I'm like, who in their right mind would want to raise a family in this country that provides absolutely no support? And, on one hand, you have a giant portion of the female workforce unable to go back to work because of the astronomical prices associated with childcare. And the response, the overwhelming response from every Republican, but also some corporate Democrats is, oh, they're just bums. They just want to sit around in their pajamas and they don't want to work. No, I would venture to say a lot of people want to work, but the conditions to make it possible for them to go to work just aren't there. And neither Democrats and certainly not Republicans are doing a damn thing about it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, this is like, if you, and this is also, I think, why it's sort of good to have, like, to go, like, on the one hand, obviously, I think that as a sort of core issue of individual rights, I think, you know, being able to control your own body is about as basic as it gets, right? You know, and I think that is a really important line to draw. But at the same time, you know, it's worth going beyond the kind of framing of thinking of this just purely in terms of, like, negative rights, right? You know, you're right against having the government say you know you can't do something, because as important as that is, right? I mean, if we really want people to have, like, meaningful reproductive freedom, that they could, like, make whatever family planning decisions they want to have, I think, you know, we should certainly be able to understand, you know, leftists, democratic socialists, that, like, that's you know, people don't, like, just saying that you're not legally forbidden from doing something, right, you know, isn't enough to mean that you have, like, a meaningful choice, right? Like, a meaningful choice would be, yeah, you're not legally required to stay pregnant, but also, you know, and you have, you know, Medicare for all, you know, someday, right? You know, having, like, providing free abortion, but also you don't have any economic pressures on you to make, like, one particular decision or another, right? I mean, that you can have, you know, that if you do, you know, if you do want to start a family, right? I mean, that you can have high enough wages that you can that you can actually, like, do that, and, you know, and feel like you're in a position to do that, you know, that they have a, like, this is something that drives me crazy. You know, like, when I look at, you know, you're talking about, like, well, I mean, the initial clip, right, you know, was about, like, Republican hypocrisy on this. And this is something that really gets me with, you know, because there's this sort of crop of, like, there's this sort of post-Trump crop of, like, people who want to call themselves, like, brand themselves as economic populists now. There's, like, sort of, like, JD Vance, Blake Masters, you know, like, these guys. And one of the trademark things they do, because it makes them sort of sound populist on economics, and it's also something they can do to appeal to the conservative side of the culture war, is they all like to make these comments about how, like, oh, you know, you should be able to, like, raise a family on just one income. And it's like, well, look, I agree with you. You should. That'd be great, right? Like, what's your plan to make that happen, right? Like, I don't think anybody should be, like, you know, pressured into making that choice. But if you want to, great, wonderful, right? But, like, what's the JD Vance, Blake Masters, you know, Peter Thiel, frankly, right? Like, what's their plan to, like, actually make that economically possible for anybody?
I mean, their only so-called economic plan is to continue selling out to our corporate overlords while simultaneously pointing the finger at workers and just accusing them of not working hard enough or not taking enough personal responsibility. Like, it's really, really important for people to understand, and I know your audience certainly does, that when the right wing tries to piggyback off of this economic populist message, they do it in usually an incredibly vague way that lacks any specificity regarding, like, what they would do to actually rein in corporate greed. They don't actually want to rein in corporate greed. It always goes back to two things for them. The number one thing is we need to change the culture, right? Mm-hmm. We have a culture problem in America, laziness and entitlement, allegedly. When in reality, you look at productivity among American workers, and it has shot up year after year, yet their wages have remained stagnant since the 1970s. What they do is, like, this pretend economic populism where they'll attack Disney or Amazon, not because of wage theft or anything like that, but specifically because these companies are too woke. Goes back to culture. It's always culture for them. And then sometimes when you go to some of the more nefarious individuals on the right, like Tucker Carlson, for instance, their other solution is we need to do mass deportations. Right. This needs to be like a white ethno state. He doesn't say it as overtly, but it's what he's implying. And so it's not really about helping ordinary people live comfortable lives where they can actually enjoy the fruits of their labor. It's really about demonizing individuals for not living up to whatever their expectations are. And just one other thing I want to mention, there are two examples from recent weeks. We talked about it on TYT. One was Charlie Kirk giving the advice of working for free out of high school. Like, don't go to college, just work for free. That's how doors open up for you, right? That's how it all works. Mind you, this is a guy who graduated high school, got rejected from West Point, and then proceeded to take Republican donor cash to do this whole Turning Point USA garbage that he's doing. And then the other one is Sean Hannity, who was like, pretending like he works 70 hours a day or something and urging Americans to work longer hours to make ends meet. I mean, this is who they are. This is what they represent.
Yeah, actually, so I wrote something for the Daily Beast about the Hannity one. And I did the math on that because so he says, like, oh, you should be willing to, if you don't want to be poor, basically you should be willing to work 70, 80, 90 hours a week. And he said, that's what I do.
Right.
And
Sure, you do. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, he does his radio show is 3 hours. That's 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern, and his TV show Hannity on Fox is 1 hour. So that's 4 hours a day. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that he's doing an hour of prep time for every hour on the air. I don't know that I really believe that in his case. There are lots of people who do more, but I don't think, I think Hannity's got a giant staff. I think he actually personally does like barely anything. But like, even if it was, right, even if it was an hour of prep time for every hour on the air, those two, that gets us up to 8 hours a day. But both of those shows are Monday through Thursday. So
exactly.
That would be 32 hours a week. That's less than the work week in France.
Yeah, and look, let's take what he says at face value. Okay, let's be fair. Let's be fair, overly and needlessly fair to him, and take the 70 to 80 hours a week at face value. Okay, but what are you proposing here? Because you are in an air-conditioned room where, and I'm saying this as someone who hosts a show, right?
Yeah.
My labor is very different from what a construction worker does, for instance, or what a person in the service industry has to go through. Look, I've worked in the service industry before. An 8-hour shift at Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf was enough for me to just like want to end it all. It was hard. It's really difficult. You're dealing with unruly customers. I had a woman throw a hot latte at me after I had remade it for her 4 different times, but it wasn't to her liking. You're on your feet the entire time. And this is me as, at the time, a college student who has the, physical energy to be able to kind of withstand that. But as we can see in the aging population that tends to work in the service industry more and more, because really that's the only sector of the economy we have jobs in at this point. It's a lot. It's a lot for their bodies to go through. And so he's doing this like super disconnected and honestly expected thing of, well, I work really hard in my air-conditioned room where I just sit in front of a computer and then I regurgitate what someone else wrote for me when I'm on camera. Why can't, all these other workers work as hard as I do? I mean, it's just nonsense, absolute nonsense. Besides which, if you're going to make arguments like, oh, our culture is declining, where are the fathers? Where are the fathers? I'll tell you where the fathers are. They're probably working their third job of the day and have no other choice. So if you genuinely care about family values, one of the best things you can do is ensure that people are paid a living wage and ensure that they're not working insanely long hours that takes them away from time with their kids, with their family. But they're full of shit. They're full of it when it comes to everything. I don't know if I can curse on this show. Sorry.
Yeah, you can curse as much as you want. It's fine. I mean, even at the bottom end of that range, 70 hours a week, that's 10 hours a day, every day, even Sunday. I don't know when you're supposed to see your kids, right? Like if that's how much you're working. But the Charlie Kirk one is also really funny to me, just because when I did my debate with Charlie Kirk, he had like the one place, like you said about immigration, right? The one place where he was like actually seemed to be the most interested in like what wages were was when he was talking about immigration. And so he's willing to, like do all of the things that like when Trump let ICE off the leash, they were doing, like going around and like grabbing people outside of churches, grabbing people, at court, as they're like going to pay traffic tickets, grabbing people as they're, like leaving their home to, pick up their children from school, separate children from their parents. All of that stuff we're supposed to support because maybe this will indirectly result in higher wages for the people who are allowed to stay. But just like having a higher minimum wage, right? Like that's off the table, right? You can't do that.
Yeah, look, these are mouthpieces for the same corporate interests that have completely captured all of our politicians, most of our politicians. I wouldn't say all, because, there are a handful of pretty principled members of Congress. And of course, there's Bernie Sanders. But overall, I mean, this entire system, the media apparatus in this country, the politicians, all of them do the bidding of corporate interests because they're incentivized to. Something that Nando says often, and I think it's such a great point, is we spend way too much time trying to determine whether politicians are good people or bad people, when in reality, that doesn't really matter at all.
Right.
What matters is, what does the system incentivize them to do? And overwhelmingly, they're incentivized to enrich themselves. And yes, we talk about corruption a lot, with corporate donors and all that. But I think that's half the story.
Mm-hmm.
The other half is their personal financial investments in private businesses and individual stocks. They are just incentivized to work against us. And unless we do something about that system, having these like hollow debates about, Democrat or Republican, I'm just sick of it. It doesn't matter. I mean, Nancy Pelosi's over in freaking Taiwan, not right now, but she visited Taiwan, not because she gives a shit about Taiwan. Come on. She's over there because she's, along with, by the way, an incoming congressional delegation, because they're concerned about how China might meddle with the semiconductor chip manufacturing in Taiwan, and that might hurt business interests here in the United States. It's always about the money. And so unless we do something about that system, any kind of economic populism you hear from any politician, either on the left or the right, is just, and when I say left, I mean broad Democrat, they're not, it's all just lip service, and there's really nothing more there.
Yeah. And I think it's also like, I think what makes it even harder is that even when you don't have those those personal incentives, like which obviously in the US, because like we have such a like farcically corrupt, like obvious version of it here, right? Like you usually do, right? But like even when you don't, right? Like there are certainly countries in Europe, other places with like better campaign finance systems and whatever, that that's you do have many fewer of those kinds of incentives. There's still a problem because business owners have this like built-in veto, right? That they can like threaten to like, we're gonna like take our factory out of the country or whatever. That is something that politicians have to constantly worry about, that they could use that to like discipline them, if they start to do too many things that benefit the interests of working class people, which is why this is not a complete whatever, but I mean like this is why if you're really going to change the incentives, right, like it has to like you just need like a much more organized working class, right? Because you need some sort of like countervailing form of source of power, or else even if like all of the politicians were like the most morally pure people ever, right? It still,
absolutely,
still wouldn't change very much.
Absolutely. And I think we talk about Scandinavian countries all the time, and they've got their own flaws as well.
Sure.
Like, not to
of course,
romanticize everything, but what stands out about them is they don't need a federal government to weigh in on wages, because they have labor that's actually powerful, represented by unions, and the unions negotiate wages on their behalf. And so they make significantly more than American workers do as a result of that. And so while a lot of what we're talking about is, a downer for sure,
Yeah.
the one thing that does give me hope, and where I've been kind of focusing more of my energy, both on the show, but also personally to kind of like keep me going, is the momentum that we're seeing among workers who are unionizing, whether it be at Starbucks or Amazon. That gives me a little bit of hope. But if we're just hyper focused on electoral politics and that's all we focus on, well, we're in for a world of hurt, as we've already experienced, because that system is already deeply flawed. I don't really see any progress in changing it. So it's really about creating outside pressure. And the best way to do that is organizing workers.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you look at, all of this stuff, like we just had, we'll move on from this in a second, but I think it's worth saying, like, if you, like we just had all of this hoopla about how, Joe Manchin finally agreed to something. We got the Inflation Reduction Act, and there's all this argument about whether the environment, like the good environmental things in it outweigh the bad environmental things in it, right? I mean, that's the big argument, even among sort of progressive, commentators, that, because it's got all of this positive environmental investment, but it's also got these like massive giveaways to the fossil fuel industry. But like, also remember what else we were supposed to get, right? I mean, we were like originally, like when Biden came in, and like they announced the Build Back Better agenda, right, with all this fanfare, right? We were supposed to get universal pre-K and free community college, and the PRO Act to make it easier to organize unions, and like there were like 20 more things that I'm not thinking of right off the top of my head now, right? We're supposed to.
They were supposed to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices for all pharmaceutical drugs, not just 10 drugs, which will start kicking in 2026. Yeah. They were supposed to make the child tax credit permanent, which, look, I don't know. Sometimes even progressives get on my case about being a little too harsh, but like, what do you want me to do? Okay, like take the facts as they are. Biden implements the child tax credit for 1 year and brags about how it's going to reduce poverty, child poverty, by 50%. Which, I don't know. I mean, great, I guess, but I would like to see no child poverty in one of the richest countries in the world. How about that? But okay, fine. You want to brag about that? Great. We're going to make it permanent, but they fail to make it permanent. And so you can't even lift 50% of children living in poverty out of poverty, and you want me to like give you kudos for this. Okay. And the bulk of the bill that ended up passing, for all of the environmentalists out there who maybe didn't take a moment to actually read the provisions, is just tax subsidies for corporations, right? That might be interested in investing in renewable energies. Okay, fine. If we need to persuade them to invest in the future, great. But before they could use federal lands for, let's say, windmills or solar panels or anything like that, they have to first provide lease opportunities for more oil and gas drilling. I want to see how this all plays out. The other thing in that bill, well, it's great because there's actually a provision in there that's going to help subsidize ordinary Americans who want to transition to electric vehicles. Fantastic. Except the electric vehicles need to be manufactured in the United States, and the materials for the electric vehicles need to be sourced from the United States. You want to know how many electric vehicles currently exist on the market that fit that criteria? 0. So I'm curious what's going to happen with the money that's being allocated for that specific provision. It's probably going to be similar to what we experienced with the COVID relief bills, where tens of billions of dollars like miraculously didn't get spent. I wonder why. And then they, shifted over to some other bill that they're working on. I find it super suspicious. And I don't think that this is going to be the life-changing legislation that we need to both help Americans, of course, but also do something significant enough to combat the climate emergency we're experiencing.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. But I also think that it's that, you know, just in terms of everything that we were originally supposed to have, I mean, there is this kind of like, there is this thing that gets really depressing about that if you like think back to like 2008, right? Because some of these very same things were on the Obama campaign website in 2008, right? There was going to be a card check, right, which is like part of what, you know, was going to be the PRO Act, make it easier to organize unions. There was going to be a public option for health insurance. I think free community college might have even been in there, you know, back then. And this is the thing. I mean, this is why I think the cynicism is warranted, because if nothing changes in terms of those like power relations at the bottom of society, right, that like then, and so the incentives don't change, right, because you don't have like a kind of organized, restless working class that could, you know, that could like push the system more, then yeah, I mean, like you could just imagine, it's like really easy to imagine it being like 2032 and there's a presidential election and like whoever's running then like has all this same stuff on there, right? You know, and it's like the eternal sunshine of the spotless mind, you know, that we're just like, it's like it's always new.
Yeah, no, 100%. And okay, this is a weird thing to mention in this context, but as you were talking, it reminded me of something that the attorney, his name's Mark Bankston, representing the Sandy Hook families in the defamation lawsuit against Alex Jones. You know, in my interview with him, I asked him, look, I mean, it feels good to see a little bit of justice and some consequences for Alex Jones, but at the end of the day, Alex Jones is a symptom of a broader problem in my mind, right? Because in order for Alex Jones to thrive, you need an audience that believes in him. And so what does it say about our country that you have a portion of the, you know, the voting, you know, population that watches this lunatic and thinks like, no, he nailed it, right? And it's because they don't trust our institutions. Right. They don't trust the media. And what Bankston said was so on point. He was like, no, I mean, it is a symptom of a broader problem. And the broader problem is that people's material needs are not met, but they're being told by the press, everything's great, everything's awesome, right? And so how do you trust the media if they're telling you that while you're struggling to put food on the table for your kids or pay your rent? It's madness. And unless those issues are addressed, we're going to have a billion Alex Jones popping up all over the place to exploit the pain and suffering that people are feeling.
Totally. I mean, like the stuff that Alex Jones says, or the stuff that like, you know, whatever QAnon says, you know, is like, it's this like distorted, like, you know, like Hall of Mirrors, crazy town version of something that like resonates for a reason, right? You know, because it's like, oh, you have this elite group that could do whatever they want and, you know, get away with murder and, you know, and have, I mean, you know, that you could have, I mean, God, you know, you could have a bunch of rich pedophiles who all get away with it. You know, it's like, well, that's not totally wrong, right? You know, the details are very wrong, right? You know, but the like, you know, but the sort of like core intuition, like even if we didn't know about Epstein and all that, right? I mean, the sort of core intuition, this like captures something about people's experience of how the world works.
Totally. I mean, think about how many Americans lost their homes in the 2008 economic collapse. And then the response that they get from the Obama administration is quantitative easing in the Federal Reserve, which allowed for these same banks and the same private equity firms to just take free money and buy up all the inventory of housing, right? And then on top of that, they get told by the press that like Obama is a hero. He fixed the economy. And it's like, no, he didn't fix the economy for the vast majority of ordinary working Americans. He might have fixed the economy in terms of like the stock market. You have all of these corporations doing stock buybacks. So everything looks like hunky-dory when it comes to the stock market. But when it comes to real wages, when it comes to housing affordability, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to just like basic necessities to live a decent life, all of those things have deteriorated. They've completely been dismantled. We did a story last week or 2 weeks ago about how there's a teacher shortage right now in public schools. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying, because if you can't afford a private school for your kids, you're screwed. And it's just, I don't know. Like, I don't know what it's going to take for Democrats to wake up and realize the very real and justified rage that people feel toward them. And I specifically mentioned Democrats because Republicans have always shown us who they are. They don't hide it. Democrats, though, still pretend to be this like FDR loving party when in reality, they have gone against everything FDR represented, really.
Yeah. So this is, as you were saying all of that, I mean, I was thinking this is actually a good transition to something else I want to talk to you about today, which is, and, it's funny, you were saying earlier that, you were talking about, people kind of getting on you for being too harsh about the Democrats, whatever. And something I was actually thinking about earlier today is it's funny because look, I mean, you and I don't always agree on like 100% of everything. There are issues that, we can list off that we disagree about, but like without exception, whenever I see people like people on the left, like getting like really mad at you about something, it's never about something I think you're wrong about. It's always about the stuff I think you're right about. And one of those, I think, and one of those ties in, with what you were just saying, because I think there's a way that even on like the actual left, right? I don't mean like liberals. I don't mean the Democratic Party, right? I mean like people who actually, believe in the things that you and I believe in, that they, even in the actual left, I think that there's a way on some issues that with the best of intentions, I think we can end up sort of sounding off and creating cognitive dissonance in exactly the same way that you're saying, like mainstream media does, that like gives rise to like Alex Jones and all of that, right? Because and what I'm thinking of primarily here is about crime, right? About like sort of street level violence and the sort of, I think, very rational fear that that a lot of working class people have about that, because there's this complicated thing that happens where on the one hand it is 100% true that like that the criminal justice system in America is like god awful in like 1,000 ways, that police are could be like racist and abusive and that there is and that the system of law enforcement that that we have in the United States is in many ways, right, by global standards, like really cruel and vindictive. But and so I think that's where people are starting from, right? Is that like really correct premise, right?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, the people who disagree with what I'm saying aren't bad people who are coming from a bad place. I think they have the best intentions, but sometimes I think having the best intentions can blind you to legitimate concerns that people have. And I'm not just talking about concerns I personally have, but legitimate concerns that everyday working people who aren't working like well-paying jobs are experiencing, things that they're worried about. Like I see the minimizing of their concerns by the left. And again, we're talking about the same people. I'm talking about like a lot of times the socialist left. That blows my mind. And I'm like, there is a cognitive dissonance here and I don't understand why it exists and it needs to be addressed. And if I'm going to be the punching bag that brings this up in the beginning, I'll be the punching bag. I don't care. But I see things that I think I see massive mistakes by the left right now that I think they need to wake up to.
Yeah. So, I mean, like to be really concrete about this, right? Just to make sure nobody like is listening to this is unsure what we're saying, right? I think that there's this dynamic that plays out that goes like this, that like oftentimes, the media, politicians we do not like one bit, right? Et cetera, will talk about ordinary people's concerns about crime and violence. And the response, I think, and oftentimes they have like awful reactionary agendas when they say that, but I think oftentimes the response on the side of a lot of people on the left, and again, like people we agree with, the socialist left, they have is to say, okay, if you're saying this is like a serious issue that like, you know, that people need to be, you know, that we shouldn't be dismissive of, etc., then you're like a cop apologist or something, right? You know, you're on the, you know, you're on the wrong side. And people will do these things that, like, Eric Levitz wrote an article a little while back in New York where he made this point, which I thought was really good, that like people will use these arguments that we would never go along with in other contexts. Like they'll say like, oh, well, look, sure, I mean, you know, the crime rate may be a little bit up from what it was like a year ago or whatever, but like, you know, it's way down from like the 1970s. So, you know, like what are you talking about? Which is like, you could just as easily say, oh, why complain that like all those people lost their health insurance during the pandemic? After all, you know, there's still way fewer uninsured people than before Obamacare.
That's such a great point. Yeah.
Which would be true, but like we wouldn't say that, right? Because we think that like we think it's a real issue, and we take it seriously. And like, you know, you kind of sent me a few articles, you know, to sort of you know, talk about, you know, this segment. So this is one of them. A spate of horrific attacks in New York has people fearful of returning to work. This one is from the LA Times. Union station workers get more security after outcry over attacks. And then the third one, I think we'll hold off on in a minute because I think it's worth sort of discussing separately. But like what's your you know, like, what do you think that oftentimes the left is missing on this?
So let me just say, I think that there is one very obvious issue at play that is blinding a lot of the prominent leftists that we think of to the reality that ordinary workers have to face day in, day out, right? Which is, look, we are part of the professional managerial class, right? Where we don't have to confront a lot of the violence on the streets that ordinary people do. So the LA Metro workers, for instance, luckily they're unionized and their union did a good job representing them, and they beefed up security at Union Station. But the workers there were terrified because one worker, female worker, was dragged into the bathroom there. And luckily she was able to escape, but she was terrified to come into work. And so if the leftist response to her is, crime's not that bad, you know, we're too punitive already, like, let's move on. No, that's not, you're not winning anyone over. In fact, you're pushing people that we should be bringing aboard with us away. And I think what makes me a little bit different is, while I have a similar job, I'm in front of a camera, I'm very privileged in that regard. What I like to do to kind of like de-stress and decompress is walk. I walk around a lot, the city, the neighborhood. It's always been like my favorite thing to do, just like think to myself and feel better. And I mean, I've personally been attacked multiple times at this point. And you know, I think I was afraid to talk about how much these incidents like psychologically impacted me until I finally just had to come to terms with it. Like, one of the attacks was two guys, both drugged out on something. It was very obvious because they were acting erratically. Walk by me, and as I'm picking up after my dog, one of them grabs me by the hips and starts thrusting at me aggressively. And I had nothing to protect myself. I was alone. I didn't have a weapon. And luckily the guy stopped after that, but they were walking away and laughing maniacally. And I couldn't stop thinking about it, because every time I try to walk my dog now, I think about that. But that's also not as bad, by the way, as someone who has to go into work thinking about the same kinds of threats, right? And like, what exactly is the goal here? Are we going to wait until crime gets as bad as it did in the 90s? Is that really what the goal is? I want to read two things to you.
Sure.
So this is specifically in regard to Los Angeles, okay? Los Angeles crimes. Compared to last year, compared to 2021, this year alone, and the year isn't done yet, homicides are up 75%. Robbery up almost 20%. Theft up 25%. And we see it all around us. The other day, actually the day that Roe was reversed, after doing the show, I wanted to go for a walk. And as I was going for my walk, there was a bus that stopped right beside me.
Mhm.
Guy comes off the bus, makes eye contact with me, whips his penis out, and proceeds to jerk off in the
Mhm.
middle of a busy intersection at 3:30 in the afternoon, bright as hell outside. And I think about all of the people on the left who would minimize that, really, like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, whatever, you know? But at the same time, I would venture to say these are the same individuals who thought that Louis C.K.'s career and life should be over after he did that to someone. And by the way, it is a traumatic thing to deal with as a woman.
Sure.
It's very intimidating and it's terrible. I say this as someone who's experienced it firsthand. But if I experience that firsthand as someone who like literally goes outside for a walk during my free time, imagine people who are exposed to those conditions on a regular basis, telling them that their fears don't matter, not the right way to go. And then the second thing I'll bring up is Ilhan Omar's race in her district, which was actually a really close call. No one expected it. Okay. So she was primaried by a more moderate Democrat. Luckily, she won her primary. I love Ilhan Omar. I think she's an excellent congresswoman. But while everyone that I've seen on the left blames her near loss to racism, here's what the reality is. I feel like everyone's afraid to mention this, so I'm going to read it to you. In a recent interview with Times of Israel, the 72-year-old Jamaica native, who's the opponent who luckily lost, pointed to a proposal rejected by 56% of Minneapolis voters last November that would have seen the city's police department replaced with a public health-oriented Department of Public Safety. The initiative, rejected by 78% of Black voters, was backed by Omar, who became the first Somali American elected to Congress in 2018. 78% of Black voters in her district rejected that proposal. But she supported it and it hurt her. And to argue that she nearly lost the primary race because of racism is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, there was suddenly some huge uptick of racism since the last time she ran. Like that's, yeah.
Come on.
No, exactly. This is, I think, a general, I think this is a general problem in progressive politics that I think a lot of, I think a lot of, liberals and progressives have sort of turned it into this weird moral principle that you're not allowed to think that anything ever explains any political result that we don't like except for racism, that like that's the one explanation, right? If McAuliffe lost to Virginia or whatever, it's because Virginia somehow got more racist between 2020 and 2021. It's always it's always racism and nothing else, right? Which is by the way, to go back to the where we started, right, is a culture explanation, right? Not a material conditions explanation. But yeah, I think that's, look, we've had evidence about this for a long time. Every time, and this is kind of funny, right? Because like within the left, like the real left, like there's the sort of argument people have about policing is like, the sort of range of the argument is like, do you abolish the police or just defund, right? And then meanwhile, every poll ever, specifically of Black voters, where they give people the options. Do you think the police presence in your neighborhood is too little, too much, or about right? Right. The too much is always by far the least popular option. That's like less than 20%. Which is not to say those same polls don't reflect people's knowledge that police could be racist and abusive and all of that stuff, right? But it's like, but because working class people do actually perceive street violence, crime as like a major issue, like this is like a very real concern, even like the defund slogan, which I think there are different ways of interpreting and whatever, right? But even that is so massively unpopular because people hear that as, oh, you're going to take away what little safety you have. It just sounds like austerity that you're going to get.
In fact, yeah, not only does it sound like austerity, in a lot of ways it is, because one thing that I've noticed in LA, and maybe this also explains a little bit of the disconnect between me and some of the other people on the left. Maybe they live in different communities because, I live in a community. It's not a bad community. Like, it's not working class, but it's not a rich community either. It's like right there in the middle, right? I couldn't afford to live in the better parts of LA, but I like where I live. I like my community a lot. not the kind of people who have the disposable income for private security, right?
Right.
But I was talking to a colleague of mine who happens to live in an area that's far more well-to-do than my area. And it's interesting because it wasn't until recently that I realized that his community has paid for private security. Because he, like, every time we talk about crime, I'd be like, how do you not see it? I don't get it. How do you not see it? I mean, I see it literally every day, just on an hour-long walk. I see it everywhere. And he never told me about the private security until yesterday. And I was like, oh, okay. Now I get it.
Yeah,
You know?
which is, and this is the thing. I mean, because if you talk like, I mean, look, I don't, anybody wants to fight me about this, like, I just don't buy the idea that, like, I think even if we're talking about some sort of like advanced communist utopia in the 23rd century or something, I think like people are sometimes going to do violent things to each other for all sorts of reasons. And I do actually think you're going to need some kind of professionalized like body to like, to deal with that in some way. Or I hope so, at least, because the alternative is like vigilantes, and I don't want that. But they have but like certainly if you're talking about the society we have right now, right? If you say something that either means or sounds to a lot of people like, no police or hardly any police or whatever, then I think they'll correct, like understand that as like a recipe for this kind of libertarian dystopia that's like, private security for people who can afford it and like Mad Max for everybody else, and that's and that's an incredibly grim and unpopular, vision to put forward. It's the same thing, by the way. Like, I think that there are similar things you could say, about about like some of the drug stuff where I think that I'm not interested in, I've smoked an enormous amount of weed in my life. I'm not going to judge anybody, but like hard drugs that people have like real problems with, I don't want punitive carceral solutions, right? People I love have struggled with that stuff, but precisely because of that, I also want a system that will push people into getting the help they need and not just sort of leave them alone and be like, free will, whatever, like totally. You do what you want. And it's also the same thing as, as the issue, the homelessness issue that people got mad at you about. I mean, that they have I don't think that like, let people continue to slowly die in the park, right? Is a awful like neoliberal dystopia, right? I mean, that's totally. A terrible thing for progressives to endorse, which doesn't mean you have to support like harsh police crackdowns or something. I mean, I think you need to give people someplace better to live, but I guess the big point, to my mind at least, right? Like you kind of give us your thoughts about this is it's like, okay, I think a lot of people think that the options are you either endorse your political enemy's solution to these problems, or you just like pretend that they aren't really problems, right? That like you say like, oh no, it's just like, there's absolutely no reason other than like racism or media sensationalism or whatever to think that like crime is a real issue or, addiction or et cetera, like any of these are real problems, right? Or else like it must be that you support like the sort of like cruelest sort of police state responses to it.
Yeah, and where I'm at is, I'm sure some people take offense. It's okay, you could be offended. On this particular issue, I have deep disdain for both sides. I do. For the leftists who think like, no, we should minimize this and pretend like it's not an issue. The fear that's bred as a result of this, thinking is unacceptable. And I think it's unfair to everyone who has to live with it. And then on the other side, the right wing and their tough on crime, punitive garbage, I'm not in favor of that either. What I would like to see is true reform, right? So if we're talking about reforming the justice system, that doesn't just mean supporting prosecutors who refuse to prosecute violent crime, which is what we've experienced in Los Angeles with Gascon. It's what Chesaboudin was doing in San Francisco. And yeah, the voters there rejected him. It wasn't some right-wing conspiracy. The overwhelming majority of voters in San Francisco are Democrats. It's not a right-wing thing. It's the Asian community there was being victimized, and the response they were getting from Boudin was basically like, people are having, meltdowns, and it's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal. It is a big deal. And people don't want to be afraid to just merely exist in their own communities. We need to actually reform our prisons so it's not just a punitive hellhole that creates more, violence and hardened criminals. No real discussion about that. I mean, in California, they're talking about, we want to close state prisons and then transfer, people over to counties so counties can deal with it. Counties aren't equipped to deal with it. So we've released tens of thousands of inmates, some of whom are nonviolent. I have no problem with that, although we should have a system in place to transition them back into real life so they're not left living on the streets. But a lot of them are actually violent criminals, some of whom, by the way, were in prison for like attempted murder. The guy who's in charge of the ambassadors in West Hollywood right now who are replacing sheriff's deputies. And these are people who are unarmed, okay? The person who's leading that literally killed someone in a robbery. Now, I don't, you know what? If the left wants to reject me for not being in favor of that, reject me. I don't care. That ain't the way to go. I'm sorry.
No, it's clearly not. And I think that this is like, and I think there's also like, I think the failure of vision here is also like, okay, look, as you say, right, you should have disdain for both dismissing it and dismissing it as an issue and for the like harsh punitive police state kind of response from the right. But I also think like what we should be talking about is the fact that a left economic program is actually like, you can't deal with this just purely in terms of what's going on in the criminal justice system, right?
Totally.
Because at that point you're so far downstream of the source of the problem, right? That like you're just left with these awful choices, right? About like, okay, prisons are hellholes, let people out, what does that look like, right? Like but we know that you can have both because you were talking about the Nordics earlier, right? We don't need to talk about the 23rd century, high-tech communist utopia or whatever. You could just talk about like Sweden, right? Norway, right? Where they have one way more liberal rehabilitation focused criminal justice system, right? Anders Breivik is eventually going to get out of jail, right? Because they don't keep anybody forever. They have and is they have like prison cells that look like dorm rooms. They have so it's got a way less harsh criminal justice system. It's also got a way lower crime rate, right? And you can tell fairy tales about culture, genetics, or whatever you want to, but I think if you're going to live in the real world, I think it's like painfully obvious that that's because it's a more equal society, because there's a huge welfare state and powerful unions and and all that stuff. So you don't have all of this social distress and misery that's constantly coming out these ways.
1,000%. I mean, it has to be a holistic approach, and we've seen anything but. And I just have a real problem with not really doing criminal justice reform, just having like a light prosecutorial take on everything, including violent crime, and then just referring to that as criminal justice reform. Like, no, I'm not. That ain't it. Right. But also just like, man, just Medicare for all alone, how much that would help, especially when it comes to crime that's bred through, honestly, serious mental health issues, right? So people on the streets who
which a lot is.
A lot, yeah. A lot of the violent attacks that come out of nowhere on the streets today are by people who have mental health issues, are probably homeless, and don't have the means for treatment. And everyone loses in that system. Everyone. The person who's suffering and dying on the streets loses. the individuals who are just going about their day and get attacked randomly in incredibly violent ways, they lose. Everyone loses. The only people in this country who don't lose, handful of corporate interests, are politicians, and that's pretty much it, really.
Yeah, no, exactly. There's there are a bunch of other things want to talk to you about. We're gonna have to do next time. Let me just say really quickly, because we haven't talked about it in the show, and I think it's worth saying. There is a clip that you are very famous for, a super duper viral clip from several years ago, where you explain the difference between somebody's freedom to believe what they want to believe about religion and everybody else's obligation or not obligation to live their lives accordingly. If anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about, look it up. It's all over the place. And I thought about that on Friday because speaking of violent crime, Salman Rushdie, who's a novelist who's been living under a shadow of the threat of the fatwa that was issued against him, because his novel The Satanic Verses was finally violently attacked at an event and stabbed in the neck, and it looks like he's going to lose an eye. And I think I don't have anything. I don't have anything insightful to say about this. All I wanted to say is, because I think free speech is another thing the left doesn't talk about as much as it should. So solidarity with Salman.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it blows my mind that the perpetrator is like a 24-year-old, and it's like, what are you doing with your life, man? You're 24. Like, just find better hobbies. This is not it. But no, but it is like, look, if we want to focus on Muslim extremism or whatever, that's fine. But it's important to also note that it's not unique to Muslim religion. I mean, there are fundamentalists in pretty much every religion. And what really boggles the mind is, they're so certain of their religious beliefs, yet so insecure about them, to the point where they'll carry out acts of violence toward anyone who doesn't fall in line with what they believe. I have my personal beliefs, and I feel confident enough to talk about them, to defend them, and not get offended by individuals who might disagree with me. In fact, I like having debates with people who might disagree with me, because there might be an actual legitimate exchange of ideas. It might be thought-provoking. But in this country in particular, what I've been seeing throughout the last few decades is just this unwillingness to be tolerant of anyone who disagrees with you. If you're part of a political group or a political tribe, how dare you deviate from what the acceptable talking points are? I mean, we've just had a long discussion about the left and how they talk about violence, right? And, they'll come after me for, asking some questions that I hope are thought-provoking. But when it comes to religion, that's a whole nother ball game. And forcing your religious beliefs on everyone else, it's weak sauce. It makes me question whether you genuinely believe in your own religion, because if you did, you would just feel confident in it, and you wouldn't need to literally terrorize and use violence against those who don't believe the same things.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Anna, I always really enjoy talking to you. I've absolutely loved the stuff that you've been doing for the last couple of years, especially since you were working with Michael and whatever tiny influence I might be able to claim to. They have a
huge. Your debunk segments were huge.
But I think that I think that you're a huge asset to the socialist left, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you in October.
Can't wait. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Ben.
All right. Thanks, Anna. All right. So we are going to bring on Dr. Jennifer Burgis for our philosophy segment. Before we go to the post game with David Griscom and Matt Huber. So I had to I had to drive back to Atlanta a couple days earlier than planned because of a doctor's appointment. So Dr. Jen, as you can see, is not in the perceptive observers will see is not in the same physical location right now. She is still in Michigan for a couple more days. But Dr. Jen, what are we talking about today?
First, hi Jay Andrew. We are talking about the decision point fallacy.
Yeah. So the decision point fallacy, which is also called the continuum fallacy, is the mistaken reasoning that we make when we go from thinking that there are like gray area cases, or it's hard to know exactly where to draw the line between two things, to saying that there just is no difference between those two things. So actually we have a video. I know, although we're not going to play this, but you should say with the one that you always do in your critical thinking classes, what that is.
You're not going to play any of it?
No, we'll play the Ben Shapiro part.
Oh, okay.
So we have a so miscommunication. So we'll play. So way back when long before this show was a glimmer in anyone's eye, I was doing these weekly videos for Zero Books, and our friend Ryan and I did one, which we're not going to play. The audiovisual equipment was not nearly as good back then. But
yeah, I play this for my students, and I have to apologize for the crappy visuals. It's much better now, I swear.
And by the way, we'll be getting even better soon. But I should. But in the video, Ryan and I are responding to a clip from Ben Shapiro that we are going to play now. So Jake, if we have that, let's see. Friend of the show, Ben Shapiro.
The game goes like this. At which point should you be able to kill this baby? Okay, we're going to play a game called When Should You Be Able to Kill This Baby? Because I've been told by people like Hillary Clinton that you're able to kill this baby all the way up to the very end, right? 32 to 30 weeks. Right? And that's when the baby is fully formed. It can be born alive. It is a fully formed human being. I've watched 2 of them come out of my wife. These are human beings. These are not balls of tissue. These are not clusters of cells. And I'm sick of being told that it's just an abortion. I don't like the euphemisms. It's not a termination of a pregnancy. It's a termination of a human life. Okay, it's a murder of a human being when you're talking about these babies, and this idea that you get to choose that. Look, you got to choose a lot of things in life. You don't get to choose another human being's death. That's not something you get to choose. So when is it okay to kill this? When is it okay to kill this? Is it okay to kill this thing at week 14 when the heart is pumping several quarts of blood through the body every day? How about week 15 when the baby has an adult's taste buds? How about month 4 when the bone marrow is beginning to form? How about that? Or how about weeks 9 and 10 when the baby's teeth are already beginning to form? Its fingernails are already beginning to develop. We're talking about 2 months old, right? The baby can turn the head and frown. The baby can hiccup. Is that okay to kill? How about week 4? By the end of the week 4, the kid is already 10,000 times larger than the fertilized eggs was. There's already the beginnings of eyes and legs and hands. There are already brain waves detectable. Mouth and lips are present. Fingernails are forming. How about week 3? By the end of the 3rd week, the kid's backbone and spinal column and nervous system are forming. The liver and kidneys and intestines are beginning to take shape. How about day 22? The heart's already beating with the child's blood, which may be of a different blood type than the mother. So where in here exactly do you think it's okay to murder that kid because you have a personal convenience issue?
Fingernails are very morally significant.
Yes.
That's what I took from that.
Yeah. No, whether or not something has fingernails is really important for whether it has a right to life. Yeah, what I took from it is that I've seen 2 of them come out of my wife. Maybe the least appealing possible way to talk about childbirth. Like this magical experience of becoming a father or whatever, it's like I saw a couple of them coming out of my wife. That's something else.
I can't imagine why a man would want to see that, first of all, but that is neither here nor there.
Fair enough. Yeah. So Ben Shapiro's argument that a fetus, I mean, this seems to be the argument as far as I can tell, right? That a fetus is a full-fledged person, from the get-go, with a right to life from the beginning, is that there's no way to tell that, like, you have this whole continuum of different moments over the course of pregnancy, and it's really hard to tell where you should draw the line and say, okay, here's where, where it's no longer just a clump of cells. Here's where it's a person. So whatever one makes of the conclusion, right, which is a different question, right? Like, is what do you actually think about abortion? When do you think personhood begins? All interesting substantive questions. But, like, whatever one thinks about the conclusion, why is that not a good argument?
I mean, do you want an analogy here?
Sure, let's do it. Let's do an analogy. Analogies are good.
So let's say that our Ben, not that Ben. Actually, they both have a full head of hair, don't they?
I think mine's fuller. I think mine's a little fuller, but yeah, they're.
Our Ben definitely has a full head of hair. If I pull out one of Ben's hairs, is he then bald? No, he is not. If I pull out another hair, is he then bald? No, he is not. So we continue on. Pulling out one hair will not make him bald. So if I continue to pull out one hair at a time, eventually he will have no hairs left. Is he bald?
Yes.
Yes.
But
at what point did he become bald? At what point did pulling out one hair turn him from not bald into bald?
Yeah, I mean, if I, at the point where I only had 5 hairs left, I mean, presumably, given the way we use the word bald, we'd say
you don't have to have literally 0 hairs for us to consider you bald.
Yeah, we would call somebody with 5 hairs.
Yeah, that guy's bald. He could still have 25 hairs, or many more than that. Get down to 0. He is definitely bald, but at what point did that happen?
Yeah, usually I do this in reverse. If I if I'm at, like, a public event and this comes up, I'll pick an audience member who's bald and say, all right, let's start with that guy. Add a hair, add a hair, add a hair. And at one point, is he not bald? It's like, well, if he has 50 hairs, we would still call him bald, right? If he has 70 hairs, whatever.
I'm sure he appreciates that, his baldness, having it, being called attention to.
Probably much better to do it your way, but yeah, I mean, it seems absurd to say, well, it's exactly 1,536 hairs. If you have exactly that many hairs, you're not bald. If you have 1,535, you're still bald. If you have 1,536, you're not bald. That sounds totally ridiculous, right?
It does.
And not because we picked the wrong number. It wouldn't sound any less ridiculous if we substituted in any number, because it doesn't seem
Wait. How do you know that Ben Shapiro's babies were bald as newborns? Interesting.
All right. So Fuzzy Slippers in the chat was present at that magical moment when Ben Shapiro watched his children come out of his wife. Yeah. I mean, this, like, it obviously sounds ridiculous to say there's, like, oh, it's 1,536 hairs. That's the magic number. But we don't want to say, therefore, one hair more or less can't make a difference, because you start with me, you apply that principle a million times till I'm totally bald. And, I have 0 hairs, and then you'd still say I wouldn't be bald because, we just applied that principle a million times. Really hard to know exactly what to say about this. The fancy name, I'm always afraid of mispronouncing the Greek here, is the Sorites paradox. But
so instead of hairs, we use grains of sand. Take one away from a heap turned into a. Now, my brother-in-law, who has a PhD in physics, informs me that if you have 2 grains of sand and one is on top of the other, that is still a heap. So It's when you take off that second grain of sand or second to last grain of sand, that is where we draw the line. So he has solved the Sorites paradox for us over dinner tonight. So thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, I'm not sure I buy that. I don't think that now we would normally use the word heap. I don't think 2 grains are good enough, but I like it. So that paradox is hard, but one thing that pretty much everybody who's thought about it agrees on is that you can't go from we don't know where to draw the line because it's all murky to therefore there's no real distinction, but and there aren't clear cases on both ends. And so similarly, it could very well be that a zygote immediately after conception is not a person, and a baby that's minutes away from being delivered is a person, and you're not.
You cannot abort that baby. You
Right.
go back a day, you clearly cannot abort that baby. Where do we hit the point? And this is how I teach it to my students. The clock ticks over at 11:59. Where is that point where you're 1 minute too late to get an abortion? Because hey, these adult dating nude people are back. The idea that it matters if you come into the doctor half an hour late, that seems kind of weird, even though we do think, or many people think that there is a point when it's okay. Just because it's not okay over here doesn't mean it's not okay over here.
Yeah. Which is the kind of thing that in the post Roe v. Wade world, these like exact week cutoff issues are starting to become a real thing in states that have like 6-week abortion bans and things
Yeah,
like
but
that.
haven't we always had time cutoffs?
We have, although they're used to the difference is that while it was in place, there was more. There was like more latitude that for like doctors say that it's medically necessary because some of the laws that have been put into place or activated since then have a lot less latitude for that. But yeah, right. I mean, huge problem. But whatever you make of this, right? Whatever your actual position on this, right? Even if you think that Ben Shapiro is totally right about the substantive moral issue. Then this is a awful argument because you could also use the parity of reasoning to prove that I'm bald, or pick a ridiculous conclusion, right? And you can find an argument like this to show it. So that is the continuum fallacy. We are going to leave it there for next week, for this week. But next week we will be back. I think we'll be continuing the Dr. Jen Explains a Fallacy series. So I will see you a lot sooner than that when you're in Georgia. But everybody else will see Dr. Jen then. And meanwhile, I am going to go to the postgame with David Griscom and Matt Huber. Should be a very good time. We're gonna look back at some classic James Lindsay tweets. So good time will be had by all. But for right now,
Team Snoopy forever.
Left is best.